Hello, welcome to Real Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager. I am really excited to have with me back on the show once again my mentor and distinguished professor of film studies, Professor John Lewis. Welcome to the show, John.
Thanks. Hi,
Yeah.
Angela.
And of course, John teaches film studies at Oregon State University, which is where I met him back in the day. Won't say how long ago that was now. And we're here just to talk about this is kind of a random assortment. This is called John picked four movies and Angela went along with it and decided to watch these. And so, because there's no theme here, most of these are pretty new, with the exception of the last one we're going to be talking about, which is a little bit of a tribute for the summer. But I'll go ahead and introduce the first movie, which is On Becoming a Guinea Fowl from 2024 is what it says, but I think it actually came out in theaters in 2025 most places. This is a film from Zambia. It's about a woman named Shula who stumbles across the body of her uncle in the middle of a night on a very empty road, and funeral proceedings take place in her community. And as that happens, she and her cousins begin to, and I'm trying not to give a lot away with this one because I kind of feel like this is the kind of film like the less you know, the better. So they start to uncover some secrets about their family and specifically about this uncle who they're supposed to be mourning, but Shula has fairly mixed feelings indeed about this. This is a film I heard a lot about when it first came out, I think at Cannes Film Festival over a year ago. And then I kept hoping it would come to Salem, and it never did. It didn't even come to our art house theater, but I'm glad you picked it, John, because it had been on my list. And so I paid to see it on demand. Of course, now it's on HBO Max, but what are you going to do? I loved this movie. This could make my top 10 list for the year, actually. I really, really enjoyed this. Everything from the music to the photography to the performances, especially considering a lot of the actors aren't. I kind of went on IMDb to look some of them up. The lead actress who plays Shula, this is her first film, and she's in every single shot, and the film centers on her. And she is, at first, she's very sort of repressed. She kind of keeps all of her emotions bottled up. But I think once you're sort of exposed to what's going on with her family, you can understand why she's become the way she is. And then as a counterpoint, she has this really crazy cousin who kind of journeys along with her, who's kind of her exact opposite, is obviously an alcoholic and has had her own trauma with the uncle and is dealing with it in a very different way. So I'm curious why you picked this one, John.
Well, I was similar to you. I had read about it, and then I saw it, and I was absolutely knocked out. And from the opening sequence of
Yeah,
her Shula with the wig and
yeah,
driving, uh, and the whole sort of anomalous relationship between a very modern African young woman and what feels like a kind of tradition-bound tribal family that she has escaped from. So I thought, okay, well, there are a lot of movies about going home again,
yeah,
where you sort of get out of your family and then some tragedy or whatever forces you back. There are any number of films about funerals and weddings and stuff, and
hmm,
usually they're kind of maudlin, and the message is, you didn't appreciate the family when you had it, and you probably should have. And boy, is that not the message here. And so I thought that was one thing the film did really well. And the other thing the film did really well is that often when you pit modernity against, again, a kind of tradition bound sort of ancient culture, modernity takes a beating. But in this movie, she's way better off being a modern young woman than the ridiculous situation she ends up in, the
yeah.
impossible situation she ends up in the film. I'm also trying not to give away the plot, so.
I know it's hard because there's so much going on, and
Yeah.
it's only like a 90-minute movie too. This is one of the few movies these days I tend to find movies are overly long. This one I actually kind of thought, I could have had even more maybe. I felt like maybe we could have fleshed out even more because there's a lot going on, and not knowing the exact culture and the exact community she comes from. There's some interesting rituals that are happening. From the way the women are inside the house, the men are outside the house during the funeral. The funeral seems to go on for days and days, and there's food preparation, and but then the women are also very dominant in some ways, as we see. Some of us, particularly the aunties, have a lot to say about how things go. And so I just found all of that very interesting. But you're right, it isn't, we often get these movies where it's like you go home, you learn life lessons, and you take that back
Yeah.
with you. And she's learning some life lessons, but they're not good ones. And
No, and she learns that she's better off where she is, kind of. And I thought that was really interesting. It was another aspect that films do is, I'm probably not going to go to Zambia in my lifetime. It's just probably not going to happen. And movies take you to a place and
mhm.
take you to a place in an intimate way that you, even if I went to Zambia, I would be a tourist, and the chances of me seeing what I see in this movie are pretty slim.
Yeah.
Um, so there is something about the movie taking you to this place and situation that's new. That might be the connection between the first and second film we're talking about, because
Mm.
in this film, I felt really transported. Um,
Yeah, I did as well. And the director, she actually did another film that I really loved from 2017 called I Am Not a Witch, which is also excellent. And I think even might have made my top 10 that year. And this one, I
oh,
think, is even a step up from that one. So talk about an assured filmmaker. Her first film is terrific. And also has a bit of a feminist take as well, because it's about women that are basically suspected of being witches and co-opted by the government and put in camps to like make sure that their witchcraft is only used for the government for basically male patriarchal purposes. And so this one very different, but also I just think the confidence of this filmmaker makes me very excited to see what she continues to make. So
yeah, and again, she doesn't take the pat approach. This is very much a feminist film, um, but it's about so much that it just doesn't feel pedantic or doesn't feel like you're getting hit with anything. You're just
mhm.
watching this thing, and especially as a Westerner, not being even remotely aware of the culture it's about, I found it very eye-opening. And
And there's some
um,
also surreal moments. Of course, the costume she's wearing at the beginning, because at the beginning you're like, okay, where are we? Where does she come from? Why is she? What's going on? But also the scene where she goes to the library, and if you're like, why is she going to the library in the middle of the night? And it turns out there's like a rave or a party going on that her dad's a part of, and her dad is, there's this very interesting whatever's going on with her dad and mom. That's when I said it could have almost been longer because I would have liked to see more of the family explored. But her dad seems to be just partying all the time in this weird makeshift rave-like atmosphere they've created inside the public library. So
well, and he's always taking money from her.
yeah, yeah. He
She
takes money
she's
from her. But her
Yeah,
mom seems to have money. They have kind of the nice big house on the street that everyone's at for the funeral. And so I was like, okay, her mom has money, her dad doesn't. I mean, there's just a lot going on in this movie, but really enjoyed it. Definitely will be one. This came out on 824, which surprises me because it didn't get even more distribution, I guess, knowing that studio. But this would be
yeah.
one I definitely want to get on Blu-ray so I can rewatch it because,
Well, I
yeah.
I don't know when the foreign language. Well, it's not really a foreign language film. Much of it's in English, so I don't know.
Well, it's a
Um,
mix, right, between
yeah,
they speak
I don't
English and
know.
then,
I don't know
yeah.
how that eligibility works because maybe it'll get. It certainly got a lot of attention from critics already.
But they
Um,
changed the name to Best International Feature to because of that issue a few years ago, because there was a film that they wanted to nominate. I think it was another African film where it was in English mainly and it didn't get nominated. So that's why they changed it from
so
foreign
maybe this
language to
one will.
international. Yeah, I hope so because it's quite good. So I think you have our next film, which I'm also very excited to talk about.
Oh, we're narrowing down which film you don't like because you told me you didn't like one of the films.
It's
When Fall is
Jaws.
coming.
I'm secretly hate Jaws. No, just kidding. Keep going. Sorry.
So, well, okay. When Fall is coming. François Ozon is the director, a French director. I'm I'm kind of lukewarm on, generally speaking. And so I was sort of surprised at how much I liked this film. And he often makes these sort of sexy melodramas, and he's made a bunch of musicals that, well, that's just a genre I never understand. So uh, I forget exactly why I went to see the film. Um, and it was in a Regal theater. I mean, it was all sort of implausible. Like, what are they doing with this movie? And I was really knocked out by it because I'm I just turned 70 and it's about old people. And usually old people in movies are cute and aren't isn't that cute that their brains still work, and
Yeah.
and oh, especially women are, kind of, sex crazed in their 70s or something, and that's a joke. And being 70 is not exactly a joke, to be honest. And here's this movie where one of the things that older people care about is the welfare of their children and their grandchildren. And here's a grandmother who would do anything for her grandson. And when she is denied access to him, she's willing to do anything to make sure that that doesn't stick either. And I thought, okay, this, again, I'm trying not to give away too much of the plot, but uh, it's a murder mystery, except it's not very mysterious. And the only mystery is, in a way, who's she going to murder? And that happens fairly quickly. And maybe we don't know who did it. I think we do. Um, but the movie is just really fascinating about uh, because her life just keeps opening up. At first, she
Hmm.
just seems like, an old widow living in a farmhouse in this beautiful rural place as fall is coming, as the title. And her life just keeps opening up, and there's just this one thing after another. And then her friend, who's kind of comic relief in the film, whose son or comes out of jail and he arrives on the scene. Well, we learn stuff about her too that are, that's really surprising. And the film just keeps surprising you. Just you uh, just keeps surprising you, and uh, I guess that's why I liked it so much.
Yeah, this is another one. And like you, this director is sort of uneven for me. I've liked some of his films. I was looking on Letterboxd. I've seen like five of his films, and it looks like half of them I liked and half of them I didn't. So he did that version of the swimming pool a few years back, and he
Yeah,
did a movie called Franz, which I actually did like. But I mean, he's kind of all over the place. This might be one of my favorite films I've seen of his. You're right. It's actually, when you look up the genre, it's listed as a murder mystery, but I think that's pretty misleading for people who like real whodunits, because it's not a Knives Out type murder mystery. If you're
no,
going in
no,
like it's going to go a big ta-da, this is who did it, and then the police show up and arrest. It's not that movie. It's much more ambiguous than that. Everyone's ambiguous in the movie. There's a scene with her daughter, and I thought, my gosh, her daughter is such an unpleasant person. It almost, your sympathies kind of keep changing throughout the film too, because at one point I thought, well, I really see why this woman doesn't get along with her daughter, and I don't understand what her daughter's problem is. But then as the film goes on, I go, okay, well, now I understand a little bit more what's going on with the daughter. um, and you're right, there's all these secrets that people have, and it's funny when you brought up being 70, because the character, she's grandmotherly, right? So she has these traits that you think are, she bakes cakes and she's always making quiche, and, she lives in this beautiful house that looks like, how did you ever afford this in Burgundy? I mean, just, it's like the very typical French everything. But then there's all these like dirty secrets underneath that. And that's what I really liked, including her best friend and her best friend's son, who come to play a really interesting role in the film. And I
yeah,
couldn't guess where it was going with the son. For the longest time, I thought, oh, Michelle, who's the main character, I thought, is she having an affair with the son? That would be really weird, her friend's son. No, that wasn't what was happening either. But the main actress, Helene Vincent, I just thought was absolutely terrific. And the movie it only works if she works, right? Because she has to be sympathetic and sort of grandmotherly, but also be believable as, also having these layers of not so grandmotherly and not so sympathetic.
Well, the, there's this wonderful encounter. I mean, how are the films similar? This is another one about going home. The film
Hmm.
opens with the daughter visiting her mother, and she's so unpleasant. She's on her phone. She doesn't want
Yeah,
to eat anything. Then she eats
right.
something. Boy, does that go wrong. And you wonder. I'm still wondering how deliberate the first event is. Um, the first meal that she serves.
Oh, I thought
Um,
it totally was because why else did
yeah,
she leave the house? Anyway, we're almost giving too much away, but that's
yeah.
what I'm saying. You start to
I'm
think
trying
like,
to
oh,
be
is that?
careful about
Yeah,
that.
it's interesting because you start thinking, oh, did she do that on purpose? And also the way the film handles it, it never shows. She always seems so like nonplussed about it all, or she reacts exactly the way someone would if they were innocent all the time.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, she never says, I, I, anybody keeps me from my grandson, you know, they'll have hell to pay. Well, guess what? That's exactly what happens in the film. That what would you do if you were
Yeah.
told you couldn't see your grandson? And the answer is in the movie. I thought the guy who plays Vincent is just terrific too.
Oh, yeah.
There's you just he doesn't I think what you said a minute ago is really right. You can't pin any of these people down, and so how many movies do you watch, and the characters are so nuanced, you just
Yeah.
baffled.
Yeah, no, the
I don't
writing
know
on this is just
what's
really
going on.
terrific. The layers to each character, not just the main one. And then the grandson, without Kevin, without giving something away, let's say I have to talk to you about this after we're done taping a little bit because this has been driving me crazy since I saw it. There's a scene when he's younger, right? But towards the end, when the police talk to him, and he says something, basically, I think covering up, right, for his grandmother. And I thought, now why would he do that as a kid? Like so the moral ambiguity and the way a lot of the characters act, like knowing what he probably knows underneath about what has happened. Why does he choose to tell the police officer what he chooses to tell her? Is this really fascinating to me?
Yeah, yeah. Which I actually have grandchildren, and nobody keeps me from seeing them, but
But you would kill to
I
see them.
that's what I think is so interesting, that the grandchild does have a kind of moment of truth at the end. Now, he doesn't know the details. Actually, we don't know the details either. I think we have a pretty good guess at what happened, but we don't actually see it exactly, so we don't know. Um, and the kid just loves his grandma, and it's again, it. There are so few films that give older people agency, like
Mhm.
um, and that aren't comic relief or whatever. Um,
Right.
I thought that was what was so interesting about it. I'm guessing Ozone is an older guy. I don't know, but he's been making movies for so long. I'm guessing he's probably in his 60s at least. So I think maybe he's making a movie that reflects that. Because among other reasons why I liked the movie, including its subtlety, was its treatment of older people,
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
I
it's
thought
like
that was
the
really
counter to a movie like Velma, which I enjoyed on like a three-star movie level, but where the old people are daffy and go on adventures and do wild things.
exactly,
But
or
it's a little bit like
Befriended.
hee hee, it's funny because they're old. So
No, or there was nothing predictable about this
no,
character,
no,
and
nothing.
yeah, and she was great.
Yeah, really good film. Thank you for suggesting that one because it's probably one I would have missed otherwise. So
Oh, well, good. So I'm two for two, but now I'm about to fall off a cliff.
yeah,
So here we are. So is this me again?
yep.
So I don't understand anybody who doesn't like this movie. So I'll
So I
start
guess you
there.
don't understand me anymore.
Well, it's Mr. Jimmy, and it's about a Japanese guitar virtuoso who does note for note reproductions of concerts by Led Zeppelin's guitarist Jimmy Page. And the film's about a couple of things. First of all, I think it's a good documentary just as a music documentary. But I think what's more interesting about it is a kind of revelation about kind of cultural difference. That the reason why Mr. Jimmy, which is his professional name, um, and he actually goes by Jimmy Sakurai now, though that's not his birth name. Um, why he does what he does is this sort of Japanese sort of idea of reverence and perfection, that there's no point in playing this music, he feels, music he loves, if you don't do it right. And the movie's about that. It's a little bit like in the old days when you went to a sushi restaurant and there was a proper sushi chef. This is no longer true. It's scandalous to me. Um, that chef had studied 10 years, 10
Mhm.
years to learn to cut fish. 10 years.
Yeah. I think
And
that still
that's
exists in
something
Japan,
that
but
makes no sense to Americans because everything has to be instant. And I think the film follows him as he has a couple of bands, and the bands fall apart all the time because they can't deal with him because he's trying to say, yeah, but we need to be really good at this to do the music justice, and they sort of go along with him until it becomes just too much for them to bear. And I just thought the film was really interesting on that level. I should add that I'm a very, I grew up with that music, and I think for people of my generation, there was this band called the Yardbirds, and there were these three guitarists who came out of Yardbirds: Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, and Jimmy Page. And I think you could probably do a kind of psychoanalysis based on which one you liked the best. And for me, it's like not even a discussion. It's
not even a
Page.
discussion. It's Page for you. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I
and
knew
I
that.
think yeah. Anyway, I think that probably explains my affection for the film as well.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me. I mean, I'm obviously, and I told you this going in, I'm not a huge like Zeppelin fan, but that don't have to be to necessarily if it's a good documentary. My issue with the movie, there's a couple things. One, I don't like cover band slash tribute bands. I'm married to a composer who does original music, and so it's fairly irritating for me to see a movie about. I don't care if he calls it revival or tribute. It doesn't matter. Like the guy has obviously got some talent, but I would love to see him turn that talent into something that's not just reproducing someone else's music over and over. It's like watching
Could I
a
interrupt you?
filmmaker just make a shot by shot of, all of Hitchcock or Spielberg's movies. It's like, what's the point? Um,
Could I interrupt you for a second?
yeah,
So, if you were a virtuoso violinist and on the program you were playing Brahms,
sure. Classical music is also note for note. However, classical record artists make choices. They change tempos.
well, so does he.
Well, no, he's trying to make it exactly the way Jimmy Page did it. So it's slavish to the point of ridiculousness. It's not like
No, see,
yeah. So
he would say that he's paying um, the same compliment to this modern music that we routinely pay to classical music.
right.
And
But how many people
you
go in
wouldn't
and
play
do everything
Beethoven's Ninth
exactly the
and
same
say,
way he did?
in the fourth movement, yeah, I didn't like that chord change, so I'm just going to play the chord change I want because I'm a composer. No, you play what's written. Now you may interpret it,
Yes, the interpretation is
interpret
different often.
yeah, but you would never presume to change it. And his argument is, look, in 100 years, who's to say that Led Zeppelin 1 isn't going to be Beethoven's, the fourth movement of, the Ninth Symphony? Who's to say that it's not? And his argument is that he's already paying that reference, and to do that, you have to do it right.
Well, and
I've
I did find
actually,
that interesting, and I agree with you. The part about, and that was some of the most interesting part of the movie to me, the kind of strain he had with the Zeppelin band in particular, because is as much as they were into the idea at the beginning, once they realized what they're actually in for, in terms of the actual level of detail he wants, they're kind of like, okay, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to replicate the 3 hour concert because nobody in this year and day wants to see that. And so that, and then the economics of that was very interesting to me. But I'd rather see, to your point about that being part of the Japanese tradition, like a movie like Jiro Dreams of Sushi, or someone that's an actual artist doing that with their art rather than someone just reproducing Jimmy Page. That's just me. I also felt like the film was a little long at an hour and 45 minutes, to be honest. It kind of went on for a while. And you don't really get a sense of the people coming to the concerts. At the very end, there's a shot of a guy, but it's like, I just felt like it just, as a movie, also, I had issues with some of the choices the filmmaker made. And so with that, we have 3 minutes left. I left John speechless. He's so disappointed in me right now. So I will move on to our last film, which we have only a few minutes to talk about, but that's okay because everyone's seen this one. It's Jaws, 1975. I'm not going to describe the plot because everyone knows the plot of Jaws. And if you haven't by now, you should just watch it. John, I want to hear what you have to say about this because it's the 50th anniversary of Jaws. It's the ultimate summer movie. It's become known as that, but it really started this trend. Can you talk about that in 1.5 minutes?
Yeah. Quickly speaking, there was no summer season per se. At least the studios didn't really think about summer as different than any other season. And the notion that you would see some blockbuster adventure action film in the summer really takes shape after 1975 in this film. That wasn't what Spielberg thought he was doing. He was adapting, a novel that everyone had read, and the film was kind of a sensation even before it came out. What it did really well is it made it, it's the kind of perfect movie. Hollis Alpert, in his review, called it the perfect money machine, which I thought was just like such a great description. But that's, in a way, its success diminishes the notion of what it really is, which is it's a great movie. And I wonder, and I know time's running out, so I'll say this very quickly. When I find it an interesting sort of barometer on modern audiences, because you have the shark attack in the very beginning, and it's kind of dramatic, but it's also kind of dark. And then you have to wait a really long time for something to happen. And in modern movies, you'd never in a million years do it. It's all stopwatches, and every 5, 10 minutes, something's got to blow up. Otherwise, this new generation of film goers can't handle it. But I don't know. Jaws seems to still work nonetheless. And it doesn't have, a whammy every 15 minutes. It's what suspense is supposed to be. It's things suspended, and you have to wait.
I
You even have
actually
to.
I actually saw it, John, a couple of years ago on the big screen at Regal, when they showed it again, and I thought, oh, I haven't seen it on the big screen. It was a few years ago, so not super, but yeah, it was pretty recent, and people were just loving it. I heard
Yeah.
people kind of gasping in the theater and a lot of laughter. It's a very funny movie, which people forget. There's a lot of laughs in it because some of the characters, and so, and I think a lot of them were pretty young and maybe hadn't seen it before, so that was heartening.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. It's a kind of barometer. Are we going to have cinema much
Yeah.
longer? Because you keep hearing everybody's on the phone and nobody can sit through anything that lasts more than 30 seconds. And here's
I
a
think it's that the
movie that's
studios
slow.
haven't given people credit because I saw Sinners this year, which is another one that's going to be in my top 10. And that movie doesn't really become a vampire movie until a full hour in. And
Yeah.
I think people need to be given more credit. The audience sometimes has to be given credit. So a lot of fun. So we agreed on three of the four. So let's call that a win.
Okay.
And we have to go, but it was great to see you, John. Thank you so much
Oh,
for
great
being on the
seeing you.
show.
And thanks, Brad. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and have a great day and great movies.